Welcome to the Campbells.
It's All Good Podcast.
Welcome to the Campbells. It's All Good Podcast, where our focus is God, healthy marriage, joy, and life. Join us every episode as we share various aspects of healthy relationship goals that we have set for ourselves, provide practical tips for creating the healthy marriage we desire, and how we live life together in God-ordained joy. Jesus, others, yourself. Hello, everybody. It's your girl, Lania.
And Brian.
And we are the Campbells.
It's All Good Podcast.
Welcome to episode 14, where we're going to be discussing grief sucks and how it affects our hearts.
So, when you think about grief, there are so many different things that can go into that. The thought of losing a parent, losing a child, losing a close friend. How do you handle that? There are differences to grief and how the person's life ended. So there are 7 stages of grief that they commonly use, which is a change. There used to be 5, now they have 7. So there's shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, testing, and acceptance. So you can find yourself in any one of those stages. You may be in multiple stages, and you can bounce around. You may be in acceptance today and then find yourself back at shock tomorrow. So things like that will constantly change because everybody's emotions are different. No two persons will grieve the exact same way. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and just kind of have an open and honest, a very vulnerable conversation, just talking about our experiences with grief.
Yeah. And so when I think about our experiences with grief, Brian and I, we are always going to depend on our faith. And so we have 2 scriptures that we want to share with you at the beginning of this episode. The first one comes from Matthew 11:28 through 29, coming from the New Living Translation version. Then Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls." The second scripture comes from Revelation 21:4. He will wipe every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. All these things are gone forever.
So some of you may know, if you know me, then you know that October 5th, 2025, I lost my mother. And it was definitely, something for the family to take on. Things were different with her because, my mom had been sick for years. And things obviously shifted over the last year or so, and definitely over the last 6 months of her life, where things were just kind of drastically going, where sickness was just kind of taking over. So it was definitely a different time for us. I have 3 sisters, 2 biological, and one that's like my sister to us. And trying to navigate all of that and to figure out what needed to be done and how we were going to do it. It was definitely hard for us. Some of the things that we definitely had, we. As my mom's health declined, she never went to a doctor's appointment by herself. I would say over the last year and a half, maybe 2 years of her life, one of us took her to her doctor's appointment. And anytime she needed to be admitted to the hospital, one of us were always with her. I mean, there may have been very few times that she may have been by herself for maybe an hour or so. But outside of that, one of us were always with her. She was never by herself at night. One of us were always there with her at night. And, the 4 of us, we stayed in touch with each other, constantly knowing what was going on with our mom. There were so many text messages, so many sometimes 3-way and 4-way phone calls or conversations and things that were happening just to, talk about things as they were progressing and changing. And, I'm so glad that we did stay in touch like that because it kept us connected as brothers and sisters, well, as only son, but connected with my sisters so that we all knew what was going on. I'm also, medically trained, so a hospital corpsman in the Navy, an independent duty corpsman. So that training has taught me to diagnose and treat. I'm able to prescribe meds, to include narcotics, and to to take care of patients is what I do. So that was a kind of a, I would say, a bonus for me because I would understand a lot of the things that the doctors were saying. My younger sister, she's also in healthcare, so as a medical assistant. So just talking through all of that and making sure that we were engaged with each other and making sure that we all knew what they were talking about. Because sometimes, let's just be honest, doctors will gauge how they relay information to the patient and their family based on how the patient and the family receives that information. Not that they're trying to hide anything, but it's also tough for the doctors to come in and let you know that you have some form of a terminal illness, or we don't think you have that much longer to live. That's something that the doctors carry with them as well. So it's important to understand that. But for us to navigate through what I perceived that the doctors were telling us in the hospital that needed to be done, and relaying that information to my sisters to make sure that they understood exactly. And I had to make sure that I didn't sugarcoat anything. I just had to be straight up and honest about, hey, this is what's going on. And as we do this, this is potentially where that could lead. And my mom had a very, very good primary care doctor. He had told her exactly how things probably would play out, and kudos to him. They did exactly just like he said they would. So I think that also helped prepare all of us for things as they came to the end.
Yeah, so when I think about what Brian said earlier of how at different stages of our lives we have lost those who are close to us or have experienced somebody passing away, my earliest memory of losing somebody who I felt was dear to me was losing my great grandmother, my dad's grandmother. And so I was probably about 4 or 5 when she passed away. So I just have like little small memories here and there. She was that great grandmother that, she always smelled good. She had beautiful skin, beautiful bone straight white hair, and she would always give me candy. And so that is like my most fondest memory of her. And I just remember always laughing with her. And so she was the first person that I can remember who passed away, and also who had a funeral that was a little bit different than I've ever experienced, where her funeral was in her home. And so I just remember it vividly. I remember, possibly being sad, but not really understanding what true grief was. Um, Fast forward a few years after that, when I was about 9 years old, I had lost my bonus grandfather unexpectedly. I know at 9, I didn't even know he was sick. And I lived in the home with him at that time. And so when he passed, I just remember just being really sad because he was another person in my life where I spent quality time with him. I was around him. And now he's no longer here. And I just saw the sadness from my grandmother and other family members, but yet again, not knowing how to navigate. Was I really grieving? And if I was at 9, how do I handle that? The grief that I remember most is just feeling like every year from the time he passed, it just seemed like another family member that I either was close to or lived in my home was passing away. I lost my great uncle. I lost my great grandmother, my mom's grandmother, who I also lived in the home with. And so it just was, just seeming like death was happening all around us. And so I remember crying and being sad, but yet again, not really knowing how to navigate my grief. Now, when I think back to where I really started to know what grief was and that I was grieving and just learning how to navigate through grief would be back when I was 18 years old. When I was 18, both my great grandmother, my grandfather's mother, and my favorite aunt, my mom's only sister, both passed away very close in weeks of each other. And I had a very close relationship with both of those women. and it was very rough for me. Like, I would dream about them. They would, their voices would come to me where I would just be yearning to have a conversation with them. Our whole entire family was just sad. My great grandmother, she lived a full life. She lived to 101, 102 years old. I can't remember exact age. And my aunt was fairly young. And so it just was rough for us. And I know for me, because I was 18, I was just becoming a young adult. And so I was just angry, and not necessarily angry with them, because they couldn't control them passing away. But I was just angry at the fact that they were no longer going to have their presence wasn't going to be in our lives anymore like it had been. And so I just feel like that I really didn't know exactly how to handle my grief. So I turned to other things. I did a lot of writing. I would write poems to them or about them. I would try to mimic, certain things about them, especially my aunt. Just how, because she was a fashionista, and just things that she did, and so I would try to mimic those things to like honor her. Things that she gave me, I would hold on to those things, and then not knowing that 5 years after my aunt passed, that's when I had a really close death. That was the death of my mother, and so my mom's death was very unexpected, a little bit opposite of what Brian experienced, where I had just seen my mom 3 days prior to when she passed. I lived out of state, so she was coming to visit me soon. And I just remember not understanding, like, how is she gone when I just saw her 3 days ago? Because my mom was 52, so she was in the prime of her life. She had just a month prior had a physical from head to toe, where it came back where she was dealing with some medical things, that she no longer had to deal with those medical things, because she was doing what she needed to do. She had lost weight. She was exercising consistently. And so when I last saw her, she was a little bit lethargic, but we just thought it was because of the lifestyle change that she had made, which was a good one. And she was just maybe overdoing it. And so when I received that call from my brother that, mom is gone, I couldn't believe it, because I'm like, just in a matter of minutes from what I was told the story, of her passing and how quickly she passed. She passed of a pulmonary embolism, that traveled to her heart, that it was just so quick. And we had to go through the process of autopsies and things like that, to find out what happened, because it was so quick. And then the fact that I couldn't get to her as quickly because I was states away. So it was just really tough. I felt at 23 years old that I didn't have enough time with her. I felt like a motherless child, even though I had her throughout my childhood. I felt that I was angry yet again, because now she's gone, and there's conversations that we didn't have, or conversations that I wanted her to have with me as a 23-year-old woman going out into the world, living my true adult life, just having that motherly guidance and advice and wisdom. I also felt that I had to, change my role. So I was always the big sister because I am the oldest. But now I had my 21-year-old brother who's going out into the world as an adult as well too. But I also had a 14-year-old brother at the time who was still at home. And so it was tough, because now I felt like I had to be the mom role, and nobody asked me to do that, but I just felt like I had to do that. And so it just was very different. And then along the way, I lost some friends who passed away tragically. That was very tough as well. And then another big blow back in 2015, excuse me, when my grandmother passed. Because when my mom passed, my grandmother stepped up, to become that extra motherly role. My grandma and I were already close, but it brought us even closer. And so when she passed, I definitely feel like when it came to grief, that I knew I had more tools to work with, versus where when my great grandmother and my aunt passed, even when my mom passed, because I knew that I could talk about her, and not have to hold on to so many things. Because I definitely, with my aunt and my mom, I would hold on to physical things, and I knew, and somebody let me know that that was not healthy. because it was some things I just needed to let go and just hold on to their memory. I also went to grief counseling, which was different. So I started that a little bit after my mom had passed, but I definitely continued that when my grandmother had passed, so that I could, continue to hone in on those tools, like Brian had said about the 7 stages of grief, so that I could maneuver through them. And then I would also know that grief is tricky. Like, you don't just grieve and then it's done. It's years later that I can see a picture, a movie, listen to a song, find an old letter, where I might laugh and just remember all these fond memories. Or it could be the opposite, where I'm boohoo crying, just like it was the day that I found out they passed. And so grief can be very tricky. It can be very, it causes you to be very vulnerable. A quote that I always hear is that grief is, and the tears from grief are just the way that we hold on to that person. And I truly believe that, because I hold every single person in my life who has passed on, who I was close with, dearly to my heart. I think about them all the time. I remember all the memories I had with them. I've gotten to the place where I can let some of the physical things I had from them go. But to be honest, I still have some of the things that they gave me. Some of those things are falling apart, but I hold on to them because that's the last memory. Because I grew up in a time where we didn't have smartphones. I couldn't take pictures every single day. So, we had disposable cameras. So sometimes those photos didn't even come out that we thought we were taking. And so, I might only have 20 to 30 good pictures of those family members. I might just only have one. I might have only one recording where I hear their voice. I just found a cassette tape not too long ago where I forgot that I had recorded it as a teenager with my brothers and I and our mom. And I had not heard my mom's voice since 2003. And I just broke down, because 2003, I mean, it's over 20 years ago that I heard my mom's voice. And I just, I had forgotten a little bit of how she sounded. I wish I had videos from growing up and things like that, but we didn't always think about those things, or we may have lost those things. I had a fire in college, so I did lose a lot of those things. And so, to have those memories, I hold them so dearly and closely, because I know they helped me through my grief process, even grieving all these years later.
So preparation is different as well. So and true vulnerability here, right? So I prepared myself for my mom to pass away, but I did not prepare myself for her not to be here. And as simple
Absolutely.
as that sounds, it's a totally different meaning. I prepared myself for her to pass away. I did not prepare myself for her not to be here, because my routine was every day after work, if she was at her house, I was going by her house to check on her. So, like in the beginning, when I went back to work, it was a little struggle at the end, leaving in the afternoon and not having to go to her house. And it took me a long time to kind of get through that process. And I had no idea that that would affect me like it did. Again, because I so wanted to turn and go down that street, because I knew that was the road to take me to her house. And, I don't do that anymore. So in the beginning, that was hard. It was hard, hard. Um, and then also, in being a medically trained person, and my sisters, nobody knew this, that I was doing this all alone. But as things began to decline, I would say over the last year, year and a half of her life, I started actually writing the obituary. And it was one of the toughest and hardest things to do. And again, nobody knew this. There were many, many nights where, it was my turn sitting in the hospital with mom at night, overnight. And, we're sitting there and she's in the bed, I'm in the chair, we're having conversations, or she's asleep. And I'm literally sitting over there typing all of these things out, because my mindset was I just didn't know when that true time came for her passing where my mindset was going to be. So my thought process was, let me do this early. So then all we got to do is make a couple of tweaks and some changes to it. But I would say 95% of her stuff, as far as the obituary, I'm talking the program, the order of service, I had all of that done. I had who the pastors were that were gonna, support us during that time. I had the part, her kind of brief life story. I had the pallbearers and all that stuff. I had that one about 95% done, so that when she did pass away, it didn't take my sisters and I think maybe an hour to sit down and kind of button it up and just kind of like, okay, I want this over here, I want this there, add this, take out that, and we were done. And so I remember when my sister and I went down to the funeral home and we sit down with the guy and went through all the how we wanted things to go. He told us, he was like, he asked me, he said, what do you do? And I told him, I said, I'm in the Navy, I'm almost approaching 30 years. He's like, I can tell. He's like, you came in very structured. And he's like, I've never had a family come in here and like you gave us everything we needed on your first visit. When we took care of business. And that's just, I thank my sisters for that. I thank God that we were able to do that. But we just went in and took care of business. But it also takes me to the next step of how people grieve. So men and women can grieve a whole lot differently.
Yeah, I agree.
Lania was all, every 10 seconds, are you okay? Are you okay? Just making sure I was good. And I was telling her, like, I'm good. And, just going through that. But there were times when I was by myself that I was just a wreck. I was a total mess. And it wasn't me trying to be strong and not let her see me cry or anything like that, but it was just how I was able to navigate through it. And so, and there are still days, even to this point, that I still struggle with it at times. And so, because there's not a day to go by that I don't think about my mom. But it's, how we deal with grief and how we process it is different. I can also recall, like, right after we had done the service and now we're back home, um, Lania had posted some pictures and things, on the TV stand and all of that. And I got in my recliner chair. I went back and then I saw those pictures, and I was not ready for that. I got up. I'll be honest. I took those pictures. I put them face down. I just could not see that at that point in time. But now I'm at a place where those pictures are now back upright. I can see them. It doesn't bother me as much, and I'm okay with that. And so, but again, it's just how I was processing my grief and how to deal with that.
Yeah, that's so real, Brian. You know, and like Brian said, it a lot of times is a difference between how men and women process. I'm the complete opposite. I can think back to when my mom passed away. I had a spare bedroom at the house that I was living at the time, and when I had went back home after her services and everything, my grandma was like, we're gonna go through your mom's stuff, take whatever you want, and that was that. So I think I took probably everything as possible that of hers that I could take, and it became honestly, it became idolatry because I literally set up that room to be like if that was my mom's room, like if she was still there. And I was grieving to the point when I would go into that room, it had a bed in that room, and I would get in that bed and I would literally cry for my mom. Like, and it makes me a little bit teary eyed right now just talking about it because I was yearning for her, and I would look at all those things that I had up that were hers. I wanted to smell her perfume still on her clothes. I just wanted to feel like she was she was next to me. She was close to me still. And I did. I felt her presence with me. But it took somebody to tell me, like, Linnea, you're making an idol of your mom's death. And that woke me up. And I had to have a conversation with the Lord because I didn't want to idolize my mom in her death. But what I wanted to do was remember her and to just hold her memory dear to me. And so I did. I got rid of a lot of those things. I parted with them. I kept some of those things, and some of those things I still have today. I let myself cry it out and be angry and all those different stages so that I could get to a healthy place. And that's when I knew that I needed to go to grief counseling for a death of a parent. And that opened up even just all the other family members that I mentioned earlier, talking about their deaths as well. And again, when my grandmother passed, years later, the same thing with grieving with her death as well. And so I realized that, even in my grief, I'm that person though still. I might not have all those personal items that I have, but I'm definitely a picture person. I take pictures constantly because I never want to run into that again of not having the memory of those people, and at least I have the picture. I might not have a physical tactile thing, but I have a picture that I can go back to. I think in my mind that I can leave those pictures for my husband, my son, my other family members. I even have pictures of other family members' children, special things, events that's gone on, just in case if something happens to them, that I hold on to those pictures for them as well. And that's just how the way that I navigate just grief. And that's my biggest way, I think, of preparation, because I'm usually a spontaneous type of person. But when it comes to death and keeping your affairs in order and things like that, I'm definitely a planner in that aspect, because I've just seen it too many times where families were not prepared for their loved one to go, and then they're scrambling, and I just didn't want to have that happen. What Brian said earlier about writing the obituary early, I definitely wish I was thinking like that. But with my mom, it was so sudden, and I did end up having to write her obituary. I did the same thing with my grandmother as well, but I had a little bit more time with her because I had time to talk to my grandmother and ask her things that she wanted to be said and things like that. So I did have a little bit more time to plan and help my other family members to execute that for her when she passed.
So as we kind of get ready to wrap this up, and there's a couple things we're going to just kind of talk about. So end of life care. So a lot of things can go into end of life care. So that's why it's important that advanced medical directive needs to be done. And oftentimes you can go to your local hospital, especially if you are an inpatient. If you are ever admitted to a hospital as an inpatient, they're going to come around and ask, do you have like an advanced medical directive? And if you don't, they will do it for you free of charge and keep it on file at that hospital or throughout their hospital network so that they know exactly what you want done. So I cannot stress how important that is to have that advanced medical directive done, so that when if you ever get to the point to where you as a patient are incapable of saying what you want done, then your family knows exactly what do you want done. That also brings me to life insurance.
Yes.
um, One of the things that I tell sailors now, and I tell people now, especially young people, that when I see the young sailors, when they're 18, they're 22, whatever, I tell them, hey, the biggest thing you can do now is get a life insurance policy on yourself outside of the one that the military has, because that covers you while you're on active duty. But get one outside of that, because the price that you get now will be the price that it will always stay. And you don't think about that stuff when you're 20 years old. But when a 20-year-old policy may be $50 a month, but a 53-year-old policy is $400 or $500 a month, because now there are a few medical issues that are chronic or long term that are dealing with those. And now you got to pay for that. So I advise them to get that insurance policy.
Can I just interject right there, babe? And definitely educate yourself on it. Know the difference between whole life insurance and term life insurance. You can mix the policy so you can have one whole, one term. So I did learn a lot about that, and I would this is my opinion, I would suggest, just educating yourself on that policy that is best for you, because you do want policies definitely to cover your funeral costs. But if you know you have a family, or you want to leave something behind to a loved one, you want to make sure that that policy is enough to cover any debts, to leave money for if you have a child that you want to send to college, however you want to do that. So definitely educate yourself on the different types of life insurance
And
policies.
that made me think about too, long-term care insurance. That was a word that we learned with our mom. Definitely, I knew about that and before, but my thought process, I just wasn't thinking about that. But long-term care insurance is very important because they will assist you. They may not pay 100%, depending on the type of policy you get, But it's probably safe to say at some point all of us are going to need some long-term care insurance if you have something that's going to have you in the hospital for quite some time, or you have to go into like an assisted living or a nursing home facility. That long-term care insurance will be very important to help assist in paying those bills so that you won't have to pay out of pocket. And I can tell you the prices of that is astronomical.
Yes.
It's very much. And then the last piece of this is the wills and the estate planning.
Hmm.
So have some type of a plan. Get with a lawyer. See if there's a way it can be done for free. Google what the rules and laws are in your state. Just educate yourself on what the expectations are for wills and for estate planning, because you may be thinking that when I pass away, then this automatically goes to my spouse, or this automatically goes to my kids, or this is going to happen or that. State laws and federal laws now are changing so much that that may not be the case.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure you protect what you've spent your life, paying for and doing, and make sure that you properly leave it to your family. So again, talk to someone about estate planning and will planning so that they know what your wishes are when your life is over, and what you want them to have done with whatever properties or whatever interest stuff that you leave behind.
Yes. So that's some good stuff, Brian. Well, we know that there is no time limit to grief. Grief is just what it is. It's grief. It's, we lose loved ones and friends. Sometimes it could be even your favorite celebrity, and it's grief is grief. Like, however you handle it is how you're going to handle it. The quote that I was trying to get to earlier is, grief is that place where the love for the person doesn't have anywhere else to go. And that's so true, because it's almost like when that person passed, time kind of stood still for a moment. But we know that life still goes on, and that we still want to carry the memory of our loved ones with us, however that may look for you. I know how it looks for me. Brian knows how it looks for himself. And so we're going to leave you with these last two scriptures. The first one comes from Psalm 34:18 from the New Living Translation. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He rescues those whose spirits are crushed. God blesses those who mourn, for they will be comforted. And that is from Matthew 5:4. And so, like we had said initially in this episode, is that even though, whether you have a family member who passes at home, maybe in the hospital unexpectedly, or they have been sick for a while and they've passed on, that for us, it's our faith that carries us through. We ask God to direct us with, decisions. And praying and asking God to direct the doctors who may be involved, the nurses' aides, the health home care, hospice, whomever might be involved with your family members as they go through their transition. And so we know that God does stay close to the brokenhearted. That is how we have made it through, especially with the people who were near and dear and close to us who have gone on. And so we believe that we will see these people again, and that's a great promise that we hold on to. And then that's how we definitely, by praying and just leaning on the Lord to, fill our broken heart just with comfort, to fill our broken heart just with strength, and sometimes with the joy that we remember that our loved ones are in a better place, or that the fact that, we have these beautiful memories with our loved ones. So we just say to you that we love you all. If you are dealing with grief, for those who may have just recently lost a loved one or a close friend, our hearts go out to you. And, we're just going to keep just, navigating how we can handle our grief.
Yeah, so as we close again, there's no time limit on grief.
Yeah,
You could be fine today and then not so fine tomorrow.
definitely.
Grief counseling is important, especially for our black men, because we typically think we have to man up and we can push through this, and that's just not the case. Get whatever help, support that you need. Talk about it with someone, Even if it's just a best friend, a pastor, or someone, just make sure that you're connected with someone because that's going to be important and that will help you get through. And then nothing will ever replace your faith.
Yeah.
So, leaning on your faith and knowing that they're gone to a better place and that if you do your part down here, that you will see their face again.
Amen.
All right, so as we close out, we thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening in. Please let us know your comments, your thoughts. Give us any reviews or anything that you would like for us to discuss or any follow up to this topic. We are definitely, we could have talked forever on this conversation. There's
Yes.
so many things that we could have said and talked about this. So just thank you again for joining in. And remember,
That we are the Campbells.
it's
It's
all
all good
good podcast.
podcast.
Goodbye.